Something is already shaping your child. Not tomorrow, not during some obvious crisis. Right now, in a quiet room with ordinary people, during a moment you would never think to question. No warning, no signal, no visible exchange. Just influence, a belief being planted, a behavior being copied, a rule about life being silently installed. And the most dangerous part? No one involved realizes it's happening. If this resonates with you, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, because awareness starts with conversation, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Every week, we expose the hidden forces shaping lives and teach you how to see them before they control yours or your child's future. The invisible transfer. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something most people avoid facing. Power does not always move through orders, rules, or visible control. It moves quietly, through imitation, through repetition, through what is seen again and again until it becomes normal. The real shaping of a human being does not happen through formal lessons, speeches, or advice. It happens through exposure, through environment, through the subtle, unnoticed patterns that surround a child every single day. Your child is constantly absorbing information, even when nothing is being said. They are studying, but how people react under pressure. What behavior gets rewarded, what gets ignored, what gets punished, what emotions are allowed, what emotions are suppressed, what people tolerate, what they fear, what they silently approve. And none of this is happening on the surface. It is happening underneath awareness, quietly, automatically, like a system running in the background. A child does not sit and analyze these things. They don't question them. They don't filter them. They absorb them deeply, like a sponge that never asks whether the water is clean or contaminated. It simply takes in whatever it is surrounded by, and over time, that environment becomes their internal world, their instincts, their reactions, their beliefs about what is normal. And here is the part that most people are not ready to accept. The majority of people around your child have never examined themselves, not seriously, not honestly. They have never stopped to ask, why do I react this way? Why do I believe this? Where did this behavior come from? They simply repeat patterns, inherited patterns, unquestioned patterns. And yet, despite this lack of awareness, they are constantly teaching, not through intention, but through existence. Every reaction becomes a lesson. Every habit becomes a model. Every silence becomes a message. So the question is not whether your child is being influenced. That is already happening. The real question is, who is shaping them? And do those people even understand what they are passing on? The unaware influence. You want to believe that harm comes from bad people, from obvious villains, from those who intend damage, from those you can identify, confront, and remove. It doesn't. That belief is comforting, but it's wrong. The most powerful influence on a child rarely comes from cruelty. It comes from unawareness, from people who are not paying attention to themselves, people who have never questioned their patterns, people who believe they are simply being who they are, and because of that, they never see what they are teaching. Picture this clearly: a man who believes strength means silence, a man who learned somewhere in his past that emotion leads to loss of control, so he hides it. He doesn't cry, he doesn't open up, he avoids vulnerability at all costs. Not because he made a conscious decision, but because that is how he survived his own environment. He never sits a child down and says, "Don't express yourself. Emotions are weak. Keep everything inside." He never needs to, because he lives it every single day, in the way he reacts, in the way he shuts down, in the way he changes the subject when things get emotional, in the way his body stiffens when someone expresses something real. And the child is watching, always watching, not consciously analyzing, but absorbing. And slowly, without realizing it, the child begins to form rules. Emotion is dangerous. Expression leads to rejection. Vulnerability creates discomfort. Silence equals strength. Control means hiding what you feel. No one announced these rules, no one explained them, no one even acknowledged them, but they were learned. And once they are learned, they don't feel like lessons. They feel like truth. This is how influence actually works. Not loud, not dramatic, not obvious, but quiet, consistent, relentless. It repeats itself through small moments, a look, a pause, a reaction, a withdrawal, until the pattern becomes familiar. And what is familiar becomes identity. That is the real danger. Because unaware people don't think they are shaping anyone. They believe they are just living. But in reality, they are constantly transferring their internal world into someone who has no defense against it, no filter, no awareness, and no idea that what they are absorbing was never truly theirs to begin with, the shadow that teaches. Every person carries something unfinished inside them, not visible on the surface, but always present. Fear, insecurity, regret, unmet desires, unresolved pain, things they learn to hide instead of understand. Most people never turn inward long enough to face these parts of themselves. Not because they can't, because it's uncomfortable. It challenges the identity they've built. It forces them to admit things they've spent years avoiding. So instead of confronting it, they bury it, ignore it, deny it. But what is buried does not disappear. It waits, and then it finds expression in a different form, projection. That's how it moves, quietly, indirectly, without awareness. A parent who fears failure doesn't say, "I am afraid of failing." Instead, they create pressure, high expectations, no room for mistakes, constant correction. And the child learns perfection is survival, mistakes are dangerous, love must be earned through performance. A parent who feels unseen, who never received attention in their own life, doesn't say, "I feel invisible." Instead, they react to the child's need for attention with irritation. They minimize it, dismiss it, or compete with it in subtle ways. And the child learns needing attention is wrong. Being too visible creates tension. It's safer to shrink. A parent carrying regret, a life they didn't live, choices they wish they had made, doesn't say, "I am disappointed in my own path." Instead, they redirect that energy into the child, pushing, guiding, insisting, not toward the child's path, but toward their own unfinished one. And the child feels it, not as pressure alone, but as obligation, as weight, as a life they must carry that was never theirs to begin with. This is often called guidance, support, care, but in many cases it is not, it is transfer, the movement of something unresolved from one person into another. Niccolò Machiavelli never used the word shadow, but he understood the mechanism behind it with unsettling clarity. People do not act purely from logic or intention. They act from what controls them internally, especially the parts they refuse to see, and children become the easiest place for those unseen forces to land. Because a child does not question the source, they do not resist the pattern, they do not recognize the origin, they simply absorb it, internalize it, and eventually live it as if it were their own. The hidden curriculum. School is not just a place where subjects are taught, it is a system, and like every system, it trains behavior, not only through books and exams, but through experience, through repetition, through consequences that are rarely written down, but always felt, because beyond the official curriculum, there is another one running silently in the background, a hidden curriculum, one that no one announces. But every child learns. It teaches survival, not intellectual survival, social survival, unwritten rules like fit in or get rejected, be acceptable or be isolated, agree or become a target, blend in or be exposed. No teacher stands in front of a class and says this. No textbook contains these lines, but they are enforced every single day through reactions, through laughter, through silence, through exclusion, through attention given or taken away, and the child doesn't need an explanation, because feeling teaches faster than words ever could. A moment of being laughed at teaches more than 100 lessons about confidence. A moment of being ignored teaches more about belonging than any lecture on self-worth. And slowly, the child begins to understand the environment, not consciously, but instinctively. They learn what is safe to say, what is risky to express, what parts of themselves are welcomed, and which parts create tension in the room. And the child who thinks differently, who sees things from a different angle, who questions instead of repeats, learns something very specific, not through punishment, but through pressure. They learn to adjust, not loudly, not rebelliously, but quietly, strategically. They soften their opinions, they delay their thoughts, they reshape their expression, until eventually they stop thinking freely and start thinking correctly, correctly according to the group, correctly according to what gets approval, correctly according to what avoids friction. And here is the part most people miss. This does not feel like loss. It feels like maturity, like growth, like learning how the world works. But in reality, it is the slow removal of individuality, not through force, not through authority, but through subtle, consistent pressure that teaches the child who you are is negotiable. Acceptance is not. And when that lesson settles deeply enough, the child doesn't even realize they changed. They simply become what the environment allows. The friend group illusion. You've been told that influence comes from words, from conversations, from advice, from persuasion. It doesn't. Words are the surface. Behavior is the force. Children don't sit down and carefully evaluate what others say. They don't analyze logic. They don't debate ideas internally. They watch, constantly, relentlessly, with a level of attention most adults have already lost. Because to them, every social environment is something to decode, something to survive. So they begin to study patterns: who gets attention, who gets ignored, who gets respected, who gets dismissed, and more importantly, how those outcomes are achieved. They don't copy opinions. They copy states, confidence, detachment, boldness, social dominance, not because they agree with those traits, but because those traits appear to work. And the nervous system is not interested in truth. It is interested in safety, in belonging, in position, so it adapts. Automatically, a child sees someone who speaks without hesitation and notices people listen. They don't think, "Is this person right?" They think without words, "This works." They see someone who doesn't seem to care what others think and notice that person isn't easily challenged. Again, no analysis, just absorption. This works. They see someone who controls attention in a group, who can shift the mood, command focus, influence direction, and something inside them locks onto that pattern. Because in a social environment, power equals safety, and safety is everything, so they begin to imitate. Subtly, posture changes, tone shifts, reactions adjust, until slowly they are no longer just observing behavior, they are becoming it. And here is where it becomes dangerous. The most influential person in a child's social circle is not always the healthiest one. It is often the one most adapted to instability, the one who learned early how to read people, how to manage tension, how to control perception, not through conscious development, but through necessity, through chaos, through environments that required constant adjustment just to function. What looks like confidence is often control. What looks like independence is often emotional detachment. What looks like social intelligence is often survival strategy. But your child cannot see that distinction. They don't see the origin. They only see the result. They see someone who seems powerful, untouchable, certain, and the instinct is simple: move toward that, copy that, become that. Because in a group setting, the mind does not ask, "Is this healthy?" It asks one question only: "Does this keep me safe here?" And whatever the answer is, that is what gets learned. That is what gets repeated. That is what becomes identity, without a single word ever being spoken. The authority trap. Children are not trained to recognize truth. They are trained to recognize certainty. That distinction changes everything, because truth is often quiet. measured, sometimes uncertain. But certainty is loud, clear, confident. And to a child's mind, confidence feels like safety. An adult who speaks without hesitation, who delivers opinions as facts, who shows no doubt in their tone, does not just sound convincing. They feel correct, even when they are completely wrong. A child is not evaluating evidence. They are reading signals, tone, posture, authority. And when all those signals align, the message goes in without resistance. A teacher makes an offhand remark, "You're not that kind of student." A coach says, without thinking, "You don't have what it takes." A parent, in a moment of frustration, labels, "You're difficult, you're lazy, you're not focused." These are not processed as temporary statements. They are absorbed as identity, not a suggestion, not feedback, a definition, because the source matters more than the content. And when the source feels certain, the child stops questioning. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this dynamic at a deeper level than most. People do not believe what is most accurate. They believe what is delivered with the greatest conviction. Strength of expression overrides accuracy of thought. And children are even more vulnerable to this than adults, because they have not yet developed internal filters. They do not compare perspectives. They do not challenge authority. They do not separate confidence from correctness. They internalize directly, completely, and once something is internalized early enough, it becomes invisible. It no longer feels like something they were told. It feels like something they are. This is how a single sentence, spoken in a moment, can echo for decades, guiding choices, limiting potential, shaping self-perception. All because it was delivered with certainty. This is the trap of authority, not that it forces obedience loudly, but that it defines reality quietly. And once that definition settles inside a child, they don't follow the person anymore. They follow the identity that person gave them. The hardest truth. Now comes the part most people instinctively avoid, the part that shifts the focus away from the outside world and brings it directly back to you. Because up until now, it has been easy to look outward, at teachers, at friends, at relatives, at systems. It is comfortable to believe the influence is out there. But it isn't only out there. You are not separate from this system. You are inside it. You are part of the environment your child is learning from every single day. And that means something most people don't want to admit. If you have not examined yourself, you are also passing things down. Not just through what you say, but through how you are. Your fears, your habits, your reactions, your emotional patterns, your silent rules about life. All of it is being observed. All of it is being observed. Not intentionally, not consciously, automatically. You don't have to teach it. You only have to live it. A hesitation you never question becomes a pattern they repeat. A fear you quietly obey becomes a limit they inherit. A belief you never challenged becomes a rule they follow. And the most dangerous part is this: you may not even recognize it in yourself. Because what feels normal to you does not feel like a pattern. It feels like reality, like this is just how things are. But that is exactly how unconscious transmission works. It hides itself inside what feels obvious, what feels unquestionable, what feels like truth. Niccolò Machiavelli understood a harsh reality about human nature. People rarely act from conscious intention. They act from internal forces they do not fully see, patterns they never chose, beliefs they never examined, reactions they never interrupted. And when those forces remain unexamined, they don't stay contained. They move, they extend outward, they shape the environment, and your child is inside that environment, watching, learning, adapting. What you haven't faced doesn't disappear over time. It doesn't fade quietly. It doesn't resolve itself. It waits, and then it transfers into your tone, into your reactions, into your expectations, into the emotional atmosphere you create without realizing it. That is the mechanism, not intentional harm, not conscious teaching, but unconscious continuation, a pattern moving from one generation into the next without ever being questioned. And the hardest truth is not that this happens. The hardest truth is realizing it may already be happening through you, the only real protection. You cannot control the world your child walks into. You cannot filter every conversation they hear. You cannot choose every person they encounter. You cannot remove every influence that reaches them. There will always be people who are unaware, people who project, people who speak with certainty without understanding. You cannot silence all of them, and trying to do so only creates another problem. Control does not build strength. Awareness does. So the question is not how to eliminate influence, but how to prepare your child to face it. And the answer is not found in constant correction, lectures, or warnings, because words alone are weak against environment. Children don't become what they are told, they become what they consistently see. So the most powerful thing you can do is not to control their world, but to refine your presence within it, to become aware of your reactions, aware of your assumptions, aware of the patterns you carry and express without noticing, because once you see them, you can begin to interrupt them, and that interruption changes everything. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that influence is never neutral. It is always shaping perception, always guiding belief, whether consciously or not. So instead of trying to block every external force, you build something stronger internally. You teach your child without announcing it, through how you live, that confidence is not the same as truth, that a loud voice is not a reliable one, that belonging to a group is never worth losing yourself, that approval is temporary, but identity is not, that authority can be questioned without being rejected entirely. And most importantly, you teach them how to think, not what to think. You show them that uncertainty is not weakness, that asking questions is not disobedience, that pausing before accepting something is a form of strength. This is not about raising a child who rebels against everything. Blind rebellion is just another form of control. It is still a reaction. What matters is independence, the ability to observe without immediately absorbing, to listen without immediately believing, to exist in a group without dissolving into it. And that ability does not come from protection. It comes from exposure paired with awareness, because your child will face the world. That is unavoidable. They will meet confident people who are wrong, groups that reward conformity, voices that sound certain but carry confusion. You cannot stop that, but you can prepare them to see it clearly, to recognize patterns instead of becoming them, to question influence instead of submitting to it. And that is the only real protection that lasts. Not control, not isolation, but awareness, strong enough to stand in any environment and still remain their own. The world will shape your child. That is unavoidable. The only question is, will they inherit patterns unconsciously, or will they learn to see them before they become them?